What happens when Hollywood royalty meets political reality? You won't believe what unfolds when Bill Maher decides to challenge one of the most controversial figures in modern celebrity culture. Last night's episode of Real Time delivered the kind of explosive confrontation that has social media buzzing and the entertainment world in complete shock. When Meghan Markle agreed to appear as a guest, nobody could have predicted the absolute carnage that was about to unfold on live television. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses clash in what can only be described as television gold. The tension was palpable from the moment Meghan Markle walked onto the real-time set. Dressed in an expensive cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, she carried herself with the kind of calculated confidence that screamed entitlement. Bill Maher, never one to be intimidated by celebrity status, greeted her with his trademark sardonic smile, but even seasoned Maher watchers could sense something different in the air tonight. "Welcome to Real Time, Meghan," Maher began, his voice carrying that familiar edge that regular viewers know means trouble is brewing. "I have to say, it's interesting having someone on who's made a career out of playing the victim while simultaneously living in a 16-bathroom mansion in Montecito." The audience laughed nervously, but Meghan's expression remained frozen in that practiced smile she'd perfected during her royal days. Her eyes, however, told a completely different story. They flashed with the kind of barely contained fury that suggested this interview was about to go places nobody expected. "Bill, I think that's a rather reductive way to look at my advocacy work," Meghan replied, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that makes your skin crawl. "When you've experienced the level of institutional racism and media harassment that I have, speaking truth to power isn't playing victim, it's survival." Maher leaned back in his chair, clearly relishing the opportunity to dig deeper. "Institutional racism in the British royal family? Come on, Meghan. You married into arguably the most privileged family on earth, lived in palaces, had your wedding watched by billions, and then complained about it not being enough. Most people would call that ingratitude, not racism." The studio audience fell silent. You could practically hear a pin drop as Meghan's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Her jaw tightened, and for a split second, the mask slipped completely, revealing something much uglier underneath. "That's exactly the kind of gaslighting I've come to expect from white male privilege," she shot back, her voice rising just enough to betray her growing agitation. "You sit there in your position of power, having never experienced what it's like to be a woman of color in a hostile environment, and you have the audacity to tell me what I should or shouldn't feel about my own experiences." Maher's eyebrows shot up. This was the kind of response he lived for, the moment when his guests abandoned their media training and showed their true colors. "Woman of color," he repeated, his voice laden with skepticism. "Meghan, you spent most of your acting career playing characters that were written as white. You never identified publicly as biracial until it became politically convenient. Don't you think that's a little opportunistic?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Meghan's face went through a series of micro-expressions: shock, rage, calculation, before settling on something that looked like barely controlled fury. Her hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, began to tremble slightly. "How dare you question my racial identity?" she hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow felt more threatening than if she had screamed. "That is the most disgusting, racist thing I've ever heard on television, and I've heard a lot." But Maher wasn't backing down. If anything, her reactions seemed to energize him. "I'm not questioning your racial identity. I'm questioning your integrity. There's a difference between being biracial and weaponizing your racial identity when it serves your narrative. You can't have it both ways, Meghan." The camera caught every micro-expression on Meghan's face as she processed this direct challenge to her carefully crafted public persona. Her media training was clearly warring with her natural instinct to lash out, and the internal battle was playing out in real time for millions of viewers. "You know what, Bill?" she said, her voice taking on that particularly dangerous tone that anyone who's ever been in a relationship recognizes as a red flag. "I came on this show thinking we could have an intelligent conversation about important issues. But clearly, You're more interested in perpetuating the same tired narratives that have been used to silence women like me for centuries. Maher laughed, but it wasn't his usual jovial chuckle. This was darker, more cutting. Women like you? You mean millionaire actresses who married princes and then complained about the accommodations? Yeah, that's definitely a marginalized demographic that needs more representation. The audience was completely captivated now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the camera operators seemed to lean in closer, recognizing that television history was being made right before their eyes. That Meghan's composure was deteriorating by the second. Her perfectly styled hair seemed to be coming undone, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the flush of anger creeping up her neck. "You're twisting everything I say," she accused, her voice now carrying a whiny quality that was far from the polished Duchess persona she usually projected. "I'm not twisting anything," Maher replied calmly, clearly enjoying having the upper hand. "I'm just asking questions that apparently no one else has had the courage to ask. Like, why did you and Harry wait until after the Queen died to really ramp up your attacks on the royal family? Seems like convenient timing to me." That question hit like a nuclear bomb. Meghan's face went white, then red, then white again. Her mouth opened and closed several times without any sound coming out, like a fish gasping for air. When she finally found her voice, it was shaking with rage. "That is absolutely despicable," she whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying the weight of pure venom. "How dare you suggest that we would time anything around her death? That woman put me through hell, but I would never, never what?" Maher pressed, sensing blood in the water. "Never tell your truth? Never speak your truth? Those are your words, Meghan, not mine. You've built an entire brand around telling your truth, but apparently, timing is everything in the truth-telling business." The tension in the studio was now so thick you could cut it with a knife, and something told everyone present that they were about to witness something that would be talked about for years to come. Meghan's breathing became visibly shallow as she struggled to maintain what little composure she had left. Her perfectly manicured hands were now clenched into fists, and the practiced smile that had carried her through countless interviews had completely vanished, replaced by something much more authentic and infinitely more ugly. "You want to talk about timing, Bill?" she said, her voice now carrying a dangerous edge that made everyone in the studio shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Let's talk about timing. Let's talk about how convenient it is for you to sit there and attack a grieving woman on national television. Let's talk about how you've made a career out of punching down at people who can't fight back." Maher's expression shifted slightly, recognizing that Meghan was attempting to flip the script and paint herself as the victim once again. But he wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. "Can't fight back? Meghan, you have $100 million Netflix deal, a Spotify contract worth millions more, and a platform that reaches hundreds of millions of people. If that's not being able to fight back, then I'd love to know what your definition of power actually is." The audience murmured their agreement, but Meghan wasn't backing down. If anything, Maher's factual response seemed to infuriate her even more. "Money doesn't protect you from racism, Bill. Money doesn't protect you from having your mental health destroyed by a system designed to break you down. But I wouldn't expect someone like you to understand that." "Someone like me," Maher repeated, his voice taking on a mocking tone. "You mean someone who's actually worked for everything they have instead of marrying into it? Someone who built their career on talent instead of manipulation and victimhood? Yeah, you're right. I probably wouldn't understand that particular struggle." The words hit Meghan like physical blows. Her face contorted with rage, and for a moment, it looked like she might actually leap across the desk at Maher. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed," she spat, her voice now completely devoid of the polished accent she'd been cultivating. "You have no idea what it's like to have your entire life dissected by people who hate you just because you dared to exist in spaces they thought you didn't belong." "Sacrificed?" Maher laughed incredulously. "What exactly did you sacrifice, Meghan? Your failed acting career? Your anonymous life as a supporting character on a cable TV show? You traded up from playing a paralegal to being actual royalty, and you're calling that a sacrifice?" The studio audience was completely silent now, recognizing they were witnessing something unprecedented in television history. Even the production crew seemed frozen, afraid to move or make any sound that might interrupt this explosive confrontation. Meghan's composure finally snapped completely. "You don't know anything about my life before Harry," she screamed, her voice echoing through the studio. "You don't know what I had to endure, what I had to overcome. I was building something real, something meaningful, and I gave it all up for love. And what did I get in return? A family that treated me like garbage, a press that wanted to destroy me, and people like you who can't stand to see a strong woman refuse to be silenced." Maher leaned forward, sensing that he'd finally broken through all of Meghan's carefully constructed defenses. "Strong woman? Meghan, strong women don't run away when things get tough. Strong women don't throw public tantrums when they don't get their way. Strong women certainly don't spend years trashing their in-laws in the press while claiming to want privacy. I never wanted any of this," Meghan shot back, her voice now thick with what sounded suspiciously like manufactured emotion. "I never asked to be scrutinized every second of every day. I never asked to have my every word twisted and used against me. All I wanted was to do good work and be left alone to live my life." Left alone. Maher's voice was dripping with sarcasm. "Now, is that why you and Harry did a primetime interview with Oprah watched by 50 million people? Is that why you're constantly appearing on podcasts and giving speeches and writing memoirs? That's a funny way of wanting to be left alone, don't you think?" Meghan's face went through another series of expressions before settling on something that looked like pure hatred. "That interview was necessary," she said through gritted teeth. "We had to tell our side of the story because no one else was going to. We had to defend ourselves against lies and manipulation and a system that was designed to destroy us." "Defend yourselves?" Maher pressed relentlessly. "By making accusations you couldn't prove? By throwing around words like racism without any specific examples? By essentially calling a 96-year-old woman a bigot on international television? That's your idea of defense." The mention of Queen Elizabeth seemed to trigger something primal in Meghan. Her eyes flashed with pure rage, and she leaned forward in her chair like a predator about to strike. "Don't you dare lecture me about that, woman," she hissed. "You have no idea what she put me through behind closed doors. You have no idea what that family is really like when the cameras aren't rolling. So tell us," Maher challenged, his voice calm but deadly serious. "Give us one specific example. One concrete instance of this terrible racism you experienced. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you got everything you wanted, the fairy tale wedding, the title, the global platform, and then decided it still wasn't enough." Meghan's mouth opened and closed several times, clearly struggling to come up with a response that would satisfy Maher's challenge. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, and you could practically see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to respond without contradicting her previous statements or making claims she couldn't substantiate. "It's not my job to provide you with evidence," she finally said, her voice now carrying a defensive whine that was distinctly unappealing. "It's not my responsibility to prove my trauma to satisfy your curiosity. The fact that you're even asking for proof shows exactly the kind of person you are." Maher's smile was absolutely predatory now. "The kind of person who expects basic standards of evidence before accepting serious accusations? The kind of person who thinks maybe, just maybe, public figures should be held accountable for the claims they make? Yeah, guilty as charged." The confrontation was reaching a fever pitch, and everyone in the studio could sense that something catastrophic was about to happen. Meghan was practically vibrating with rage, her carefully constructed public persona completely demolished, and Maher showed no signs of backing down from his relentless interrogation. "You know what your problem is, Bill?" Meghan said, her voice now carrying a tone of such condescension that it made several audience members visibly cringe. "Your problem is that you can't stand the fact that someone like me exists. You can't stand that I won't stay in the box you've created for me. You can't stand that I refuse to be grateful for scraps when I deserve the whole meal." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone present knew that Maher's response would determine whether this interview ended with a whimper or an explosion that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. Maher's expression shifted into something darker, more dangerous than anyone had ever seen on his show before. The sardonic smile vanished completely, replaced by a look of pure disgust that seemed to radiate from every pore. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but it carried the weight of absolute judgment. Someone like you, he repeated, slowly, savoring each word like a fine wine. You mean someone who thinks they deserve the whole meal without ever working in the kitchen? Someone who believes the world owes them everything simply because they exist? Let me tell you what someone like you actually is, Meghan. The studio fell into complete silence. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath as Maher prepared to deliver what everyone sensed would be the killing blow. Someone like you is a manipulator who uses buzzwords like racism and mental health as weapons when they don't get their way. Someone like you is a narcissist who thinks their personal drama is more important than actual world problems. Someone like you is exactly the kind of entitled celebrity who gives Hollywood a bad name. Meghan's face went completely white, then flushed deep red as the words hit her like physical blows. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, and for a moment, it seemed like she might actually faint right there on live television. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you sit there and psychoanalyze me like some two-bit tabloid journalist? You don't know me. You don't know anything about what I've been through." "I know enough," Maher shot back without hesitation. "I know that you've spent the last 4 years blaming everyone else for your problems instead of taking responsibility for your choices. I know that you've weaponized your mixed-race heritage when it suits you and ignored it when it doesn't. I know that you've turned victimhood into a brand, and frankly, it's disgusting." That final word seemed to break something fundamental inside Meghan. She shot to her feet so quickly that her chair rolled backward, nearly toppling over. Her carefully styled hair was now disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her designer blazer wrinkled beyond repair. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this garbage," she screamed, her voice cracking with emotion. "I don't have to subject myself to this kind of abuse from some has-been comedian who thinks he's relevant because he has a talk show that nobody under 50 watches." The audience gasped collectively. Attacking Maher's relevance on his own show was like walking into a lion's den and kicking the lion. But Maher didn't seem angry at the insult. If anything, he looked almost amused by her desperation. "Has been," he chuckled. "Meghan, I've been doing this show for over 20 years. I've interviewed presidents, Nobel Prize winners, and actual world leaders. You know what none of them did? None of them threw a tantrum when I asked them tough questions. None of them claimed to be victims when they got called out on their nonsense." Meghan was now pacing behind her chair like a caged animal, her composure completely shattered. "This isn't journalism. This is character assassination," she shouted. "This is exactly the kind of toxic masculinity that I've been fighting against my entire life. You're nothing but a bully with a microphone." Toxic masculinity. Maher's voice rose for the first time during the entire interview. "For asking you to back up your claims with evidence? For expecting you to take responsibility for your actions? If that's toxic masculinity, then maybe the problem isn't with masculinity. Maybe the problem is with people who can't handle being held accountable." The confrontation had reached its absolute peak. Meghan was visibly shaking with rage, her face contorted into an expression of pure hatred that was shocking to witness. Every pretense of grace and dignity had been stripped away, revealing something ugly and entitled underneath. "You know what?" she said, her voice now hoarse from screaming. "I'm done. I'm done with this interview. I'm done with your show, and I'm done with people like you who think they can tear down successful women just because it makes them feel powerful." She began gathering her purse and coat with jerky, aggressive movements, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage the simple task. "Harry was right," she muttered, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "He warned me that American media was just as toxic as the British press. I should have listened." Maher leaned back in his chair, completely calm despite the chaos erupting around him. "Oh, so now it's Harry's fault too? Is there anyone in your life who you actually take responsibility for disappointing, or is it always someone else's problem?" That question was the final straw. Meghan whirled around to face him, her face twisted with pure venom. "Go to hell, Bill," she spat. "Just go straight to hell. You're a pathetic, bitter old man who gets his kicks from attacking women who are stronger and more successful than you'll ever be." The studio audience was completely silent, shocked into stillness by the raw display of fury they were witnessing. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep filming or cut. "To commercial. Stronger and more successful?" Maher repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. Meghan, You haven't accomplished anything on your own merit since you left that cable TV show. Everything you have came from marrying the right person. That's not strength, that's strategy." Meghan let out a sound that was somewhere between a scream and a growl. She grabbed her designer handbag and hurled it toward Maher's desk, missing him by inches, but sending papers flying everywhere. The security team immediately stepped forward, ready to intervene if necessary. "I don't need this," she shrieked, her voice now completely unrecognizable from the polished duchess who had walked onto the set an hour earlier. "I don't need your show, I don't need your approval, and I sure as hell don't need to sit here and be insulted by some irrelevant comedian who peaked in the 90s. With that, she stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking angrily against the studio floor. But Maher wasn't done with her yet. "Running away again, Meghan," he called after her. "Just like you ran away from your family, just like you ran away from the royal family, just like you run away from everyone who doesn't tell you exactly what you want to hear." Meghan stopped dead in her tracks at the studio door. For a moment, it looked like she might turn around and launch herself at Maher physically. Instead, she slowly turned her head to look back at him, her eyes filled with a level of hatred that was genuinely disturbing to witness. "You have no idea what you've just done," she said, her voice now deadly quiet. "You have no idea who you're messing with. This isn't over, Bill. Not by a long shot." "Is that a threat?" Maher asked, but he was addressing empty air. Meghan had already stormed out of the studio, leaving behind a trail of chaos and the kind of television moment that would be replayed for years to come. The studio remained silent for several long seconds after her dramatic exit. Finally, Maher turned to face the cameras directly, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. "Well, folks," he said, his voice returning to its normal conversational tone, "I guess we know who the real Meghan Markle is now. And, apparently, she's exactly who we thought she was all along." The audience erupted in applause, finally releasing the tension that had been building throughout the entire explosive confrontation. As the cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of the aftermath, one thing was crystal clear. This was the kind of television moment that would define both careers and be talked about for decades to come. The real Meghan Markle had finally been revealed, and it was a sight that no one who witnessed it would ever forget.